Hello, my name is Jay Walter, and this is Rebuilding. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions." So let's stretch our minds, find answers to problems, overcome fears, and rebuild our first kingdom. Welcome, everyone, to Rebuilding. It's great to have you here again today. Today's quote is by Joel Osteen. "Choosing to be positive and having a grateful attitude is going to determine how you're going to live your life." And today we have a great guest to be with us today, Chirag Patel. Chirag recently got into recording audiobooks in order to narrate his own work, which ranges from humorous travelogues to educational theory and hard sci-fi. He's currently working on adapting a 2,300-year-old Indian book to the modern era, working on the next installment of his science fiction series, Still Light, and recording the classic boys' adventure series, Biggles. Well, welcome, Chirag. Glad to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
Chirag, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, just kind of introduce yourself other than what I already gave you in the bio.
All right, so I'm from a family that's done a lot of moving around. My granddad moved to Uganda in the 30s. My dad then moved to England in the 70s when Idi Amin chased all the Indians out of the country. His brother moved to North Carolina. His sister married someone that grew up in Zimbabwe. And I emigrated to South Africa here about 10 years ago,
Wow.
which was very against the trend. Spent most of my life as a teacher of one kind or another. And grew up in England, went to a very fancy public school, was founded in 1497.
Wow.
And then made my way here just before the financial crisis hit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you talk about being a teacher and all these other things. What kind of is your passion? You've written quite a few books, it looks like, or series, and you're narrating them now. What kind of drives you?
It sounds silly, but the older I get, the more it becomes about the simplest possible things.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my master's was in postmodernism, and my PhD, which I didn't complete, was in philosophy. And the key to all of that was in recognizing that actually things are much simpler than they appear to be. It's just a particular kind of willingness and focus to let them be as simple as they should be. So I guess a lot of the defining event is what my wife calls the parish chat, where people come by and sit on the stoop veranda, I guess, the American term.
And the porch.
Just talk over their existences, which does end up having a very kind of parish chat vibe from a priest. But it's a matter of just discovery. I've always been driven by the kind of fascination with the fact that things can be very different, but people are all essentially pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that life can be lived effectively as long as you're willing to be simple and focused about it.
Yeah, we complicate so many things in our lives because we think it has to be hard to be good. And
you're encouraged to believe that being complicated about it is being grown up.
Yeah.
That being sophisticated about it is a sign of adulthood rather than confusion.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet we read in the Bible, we read, be childlike. And we talk, so many people talk about being childlike and open to learn. And we just won't allow ourselves to do that. I don't understand. I see what you're saying, how that is a good way to live. And I'm kind of finding that myself as I do these podcasts and learn how to communicate with people, that it really is a lot simpler than we think. And we do have. Go ahead.
For me, I started reading the Tao um, I kind of knew it existed for years and years, but I only like found a translation that I particularly liked, which is the Jane English and Gia Fu Feng translation, which
Hmm.
I can heartily recommend.
Okay.
Um, and the Tao is interesting because it's almost what you get left with after you strip everything but the essence out of a religion. So it's purely about learning to be within the world in such a way that you align with the kind of the manifest will of the world around you.
Hmm.
Um, like there's something in that and in the simplicity that I found very kind of helpful for like demystifying a lot of the other stuff you're told about how to make things complex.
Right. Right. Cool. I haven't gotten into those yet. They're on my list of things that the Tao and other the more the Buddhist and simplistic
Mm. Yeah,
looking
the
at
Zen
how
stuff gets
religions are
very
is, and
confusing very quickly, but
yeah.
the Tao is nice because it's all very small verses. So I
Hmm.
find the best way to read it for the first time is just to read, because the verse is meant by 8 lines, to read just a verse each day and
Hmm.
just let it settle in, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, like, look, if you're particularly focused on your own faith, then there's a lot of stuff in it that resonates with particular passages more in the New Testament than in the Old.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
just because it is much more about that kind of openness to the world and fitting into it rather
Hmm.
than structuring of it.
Right.
But I think you will find there are moments that speak almost directly to passages you're familiar with already.
Hmm. Yeah. I find that religion isn't that far away from, and the totality of what religion should be teaching you is how, like you say, to live in the world and live simply and have a focus on the inner self and your relationship with the higher being.
Mm,
And that's the kind of tack I've been taking as of late myself.
mm,
Um, so let's move on a little bit about the
mhm,
your story of all these moves you've made and
mhm.
some of the obstacles or fears that you face during these formative years, or as you've grown and overcome things in your life.
I guess I want to really focus on just how I ended up in this
Okay.
place because a
Yeah.
lot of people find it bewildering that I went from very safe, very wealthy England, where I have a very strong support network, my family are there, like all our assets and whatever are there, to South Africa, where people are getting murdered all the time. Less
Mm.
these days than when I first got here, but it's still pretty rough. You can't go out at night, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so initially, it's funny. It's almost like I was done with my formative years, right? So I
Mhm.
had my master's. I'd been teaching for a couple of years in England. I'd done a ton of traveling backwards and forwards. And it's going to sound kind of hippie, but it felt like there was a darkness coming, that there was something just moving its way in that was just twisting society in a way that I didn't really like. Like it's very even now, I've thought about it a lot and I've never been able to put it clearly into words.
Mhm.
But there was just a sense that in England something was souring.
Hmm.
Um, and from that, I thought about it and I realized that that for all that I wanted to, I wanted the things that everybody as standard wants, like to have things and cars and houses and whatever.
Right.
Actually, what I needed to make me happy was to be somewhere where I could see the stars at night and had greenery around me. Which sounds very like simplistic and minor, but in England, to be able to do that, you've got to have substantial backing
Yeah.
behind you. And so to kind of emphasize how much of an obstacle it was, there was one particular week that I had that continues at this point to be the most like horrendous week of my life. I was 30 odd, so also at the age where like I'd been here for a couple of years, was just coming to be comfortable with the idea of settling into this place and being far away from my kin and my connections.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the space of 1 week, I was evicted first, and then didn't actually have anywhere else to go, so I was squatting in the house. Then I got raided by armed policemen.
Oh, wow.
Then they went away, and 2 days passed, and I got raided again by even more armed policemen, who, interestingly, were in the same van as the first time. A friend of mine who was round at the time did try asking them about this, but they decided it would be easier just to arrest me anyway. So got arrested, and at this point, I really like barely know how I'm making any cash or covering the roof over my head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, end up down, like waiting around in the cell, get kind of pushed around a bit, but then let off. And then, like, okay, fine, went home. Like, a friend brought over a beer for me, which was nice. And the next morning, woke up, went downstairs to discover that my only remaining valuables, which were my computer and this attaché case that had like my passport and that kind of thing in it, had been stolen. Which in this country usually happens because one of the police that's come through has noticed your particular security measures and mentioned it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, look, I mean, it made me feel very alone and very intensely distant from, because there was not like the closest backup I had was half the planet away.
Right.
You know? Like, and I figured I could work it out, but you know, like there's a difference between believing in yourself when you're comfortable and believing in yourself when everything's gone, you know, sour.
Yeah. Wow. So, yeah, that's quite an experience to have to go through all that. So, obviously, you've pushed through that. You've overcome these obstacles or these I would call them almost traumatic events.
Mm.
Um, eh, what what pushed you through that? What helped you overcome those besides the believing in yourself?
So I think honestly, the biggest thing is, so I'm what I guess you could call a Gnostic. I've always believed that there is a direct experience of the divine in the world,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And that this is something that every person individually works out. That you can structure it various ways, you can find guidance in various ways, but the experience of the divine is available if you just look at the world hard enough.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was part of what drove my initial movement to just because I recognized that living in London was great, and you know it is a magnificent city. It's filled with galleries and whatever.
Hmm.
You know, people know of it for all sorts of reasons. But living in that place was turning me into a bad person.
Hmm.
Right? Like the behaviors I was taking on, not because I was becoming embittered or sour or anything, but just to survive in that environment, were behaviors I didn't really like in myself.
Oh, okay.
So you
So,
don't talk to people that pass you by on the street or like that you run into in a shop. You don't stop and take a minute or like play with your time so you can spend a bit of extra time in the sun or anything like that. All of it's regulated and checked, and it changes the kind of person you are.
mhm.
Um, so for me, when I got here with the existence of just the sunlight and being able to see clearly at night and people that were just a lot less reserved, like South Africans are quite hard people in a lot of ways, but they're also intensely friendly and open.
Hmm.
um
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
but look, I mean, it's been a brutal history here.
Yeah.
But one of the things about brutal histories is it really teaches you to appreciate the things that you can enjoy. You know,
Hmm.
so it makes you very open to just just soaking it in, you know.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing, even when it went like very badly here, there was this sense that I was in the right place and it was part of an inevitable trajectory.
Hmm.
That it was something that was always going to happen one way or another. Um, and that there was a necessity to suffering through it, partly to find out what I could suffer through. Because I think this
Okay.
is
Yeah.
actually a real issue, and I'm sure it's the same in the States as it is in England, where increasingly life is so structured and safe that you're never really forced to encounter your limits. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people end up with a lot of deep-rooted psychological issues because they have an uncertainty about who and what they are, about what they personally can survive.
Right.
So part of it was a recognition that it was terrible, but I was still okay. You know, that I wasn't going to die today, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, look, it sounds flippant, but again, I suppose this is one of the things about Africa. A friend of mine was saying that one of her mates had recently gotten into the annoying but defensible habit of whenever somebody complained, saying, "Yeah, but did you die though?" Um,
Hey, you got to put a positive spin on it somehow, you know.
right? Um, and I suppose other than that, also there was just, I mean, the family history. So my granddad, who, like, he died when my dad was quite young,
Hmm.
and he moved to Uganda in the 30s, which was at the tail end of a gigantic economic depression that hit India in that period.
Mm.
That was There are complex reasons for that, but it's mostly to do with the fact that the British had started pulling too much of India's GDP out of it, and
Yeah.
were, as a result, nailing the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, he went to this country in Africa and built up a life for himself, had a bicycle shop, contributed to building of the school, which we found out when we went there a couple of years ago. And then my dad, when his dad died, he was in India doing, I think, first year of uni. He ended up living hand to mouth just off the kindness of strangers for a couple of years until he could make it back to Uganda.
Mm.
And then a year or so later, was told by the president that if you're not out of here in a month, then you'll be dead. And left with what he could take with him, because what are your choices? Ended up in England because all of the embassies basically threw open their doors and said, look, just turn up. We will deal with passports, immigration, whatever.
Right.
Oh, there is a great story attached to that as an aside. Leicester is the first city in England to have over 50% Indian subcontinentals, so Pakistanis, Indians, Sri Lankans, because in that era, when Idi Amin was kicking everyone out of Uganda, the Leicester City Council took an advert in the Ugandan daily newspaper saying, don't come to Leicester, right? Saying, look, we've had enough of all of your type. We don't want you. So everyone flies in and you get off the plane, and in the immigration thing, they're like, okay, so where are you going? And they know London, but they don't want to stay there because it's super busy already. They know it's going to be tough. So the only other place they know the name of is Leicester. Like,
so they kind of shot themselves in the foot, didn't they?
Yeah.
A little poetic justice.
But yeah, so, and knowing that, like, and I suppose it is one of those things about your family moving around, that, like, my mum got to England with a master's degree and spent her first 10 years cleaning toilets in a factory because the qualification didn't count for anything in England. And so she had to start essentially from scratch. But all of these things are things that they survived. So in context, I was like, okay, things have gotten real bad for me. But I know for a fact that all sorts of people in the clan have been through this and worse and come out for the better.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And that does help you understand. That's one of the things I was going to talk about is, how did you feel that, were you the only one that's ever had to go through these problems? But it sounds like your family really has faced challenges, faced issues, and you see these people succeed, and to me that would say, yeah, I can take some risks, and I know I'm not going to die today,
Mm.
and I can move forward, um, and as you took this, I don't know, adventure, this decision to move to South Africa and see what you could do with your life from there. That sounds like you already had a history, an experience that was a possible thing.
Yeah, and I think the thing is everybody feels like they are alone, right? Everybody
Mm,
feels like they are the only person going through what they are going through. It's just
exactly.
part of being a person.
Yeah.
And and the thing is there is a sense in which that's true because growth can only come from within,
Hmm.
right? The only way you can get past it is you getting past it.
Right.
Um but at the same time, I think it's one of those things again like so there's something that I actually had it noted down here that I wanted to talk about the myth and the danger of this idea of the static identity, right? That there
Hmm.
is this particular thing that is you, right? That is defined by this list of attributes and this list of resources and whatever, and that this is somehow a continuous identity over time, right? And it's something that's different to everyone else because it's unique in its particulars.
Right.
And you're encouraged to have that belief, right? To see, I mean, think of it as being like the Facebook identity or like the Instagram identity.
Okay.
Um, and you're encouraged to have this idea from very early on that you are this unique, independent identity, but you're not. And it's not healthy for you to believe that you are, right? Every aspect of your character is an aspect of everyone else's character as well, because we are all the same to quite a strong degree.
Yeah.
Um, and it's almost as if a lot of the Western cultural stuff encourages or pushes you away from being able to actually say, okay, I recognize that it's tough for me and I feel alone. But you know what? Actually, there are many people that have survived through this. They're
Mhm.
like, I am not alone in this. I just feel like I am because I'm going through it myself at this moment.
Right. Yeah, and that I found so many people we as I've talked to people like this, as I've done more and more of these and tried to get interviews with people, and we talk about the challenges, and they really thought they were the only person that ever had these problems,
Mm,
and
yeah.
it was really solid in their mind that they were the only person that experienced that. And then you get in a room, I've talked about experiences of classes where they said, okay, has anybody in this room had this problem? And the guy thinks that or person thinks they're all alone, raise their hand, and 10 other people in the room raise their hand. And they look
Mm.
around, it's like, wow, I thought that I was the only one. And
Funnily enough, I actually found the way I confirmed that for myself was I found that there were certain points which I've come to increasingly see as biological. So at about 17, at about 22, at about 26, at about 30, um, there's a point where you start feeling a bunch of very particular emotions that themselves tell you that it's just you.
Mhm.
And initially, purely as an experiment, I said to people, listen, have you been feeling like this? And they would be astounded and say, yes, that is exactly how I've been feeling. How did you know? It's like, it's not because I was watching you. I'm just trying to see whether it is just me. But as it turns out, if you say to people, have you been feeling like this? They will quite frequently be like, yeah, it's okay. You'll get over it.
So before you continue with your story, let's take a quick break. Sometimes what we want most in life is just a second chance to do what we should have done to begin with. I'm author Richard Paul Evans. The Road Home, the long-awaited final book in the best-selling Broken Road trilogy, is now on sale. The Broken Road is a story of hope and redemption. It's about a man walking Route 66 back to the only woman he has ever loved, hoping that she might take him back. If you haven't started the Broken Road trilogy, you can now read all 3 books without waiting. The Road Home, now on sale wherever books are sold, just in time for Mother's Day.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, host of the Five Kingdoms radio show right here on the Tribe of Kings Information Network. Be sure and tune in weekly to hear the latest and greatest on the Tribe of Kings and also to learn all those things that you need to do to be the best that you can be.
Welcome back to Rebuilding with my guest, Chirag Patel. And in your background, you say you had these, you've been, everything you own basically of importance was taken. What steps did you take after that? What kind of in your life changed to take you to where you are now?
So one of the big things at the time was I started an NGO where what we did was, it was actually what I left the university system for, where the idea was, so South Africa has very large rural populations that get very poor schooling, which obviously perpetuates this whole problem of rural poverty. And I came up with a system whereby you could teach the subject through just doing stuff in the garden. So through teaching people to grow food for themselves, essentially, and essentially convincing the kids to go and grow food for at home and then get their grannies to help them and that kind of thing. So that both brought me into direct contact with a lot of extreme poverty. One of the schools we worked at, for example, it had to get water trucked in once a week because because the closest actual water lines were too far away for anyone to get to. So that also meant that they were that far away from electricity for most of the time as well. So part of looking for solutions was actually in just diving into the world, right? So up until that point, I'd been staying within the university and academic system, partly out of fear almost, right? Because it was a comfortable environment with established lines and all of that.
Right.
And at that point, I was like, well, things have gotten to this stage. There is nothing particular stopping me from just trying anything I want to, because it can't get any worse than this, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, it sounds kind of dismissive, but at the same time, I think the experience itself taught me to be appropriately dismissive. I think something people miss out a lot today is there is such a thing as a virtue of intolerance, right? Like, obviously, intolerance in the general sense is certainly not a virtue, but you should not tolerate things that should not be tolerated, right? If people are behaving in ways that are unacceptable, you should be intolerant about it, right? If you are dragging your feet through your own existence, then you should be intolerant towards yourself,
right?
You know? Like,
yeah, I call that attachment. If you attach to things, this is who I am, and if this goes away, I don't have any reason to exist. You attach to that, that's the same kind of the way I would think about it.
Yeah, and you've got to have that kind of firm commitment to whatever life you're living, because so in that moment in particular, it came home to me that my choices were to either give up on the adventure here, which meant giving up on a quality of life that, for all that it was a lot tougher, felt more fulfilling, or like give up on the idea of going home, right? Because up until that point, I had still been kind of keeping in mind I might return at some point.
Yeah, still had the escape route plan.
Exactly. And what that event taught me was that I needed to just burn down the escape plan. Right?
Mm,
It's good to have plan Bs, but I needed to wholeheartedly commit to just making it work, however it happened and whatever it took. Partly because also, like when I was initially coming here, a lot of people told me not to, which kind of depressed me for a while until I realized that they were saying that to justify the fact that they had wanted to do something similar but hadn't.
right.
You
Yeah.
know, and people do this all the time. They give you advice that exists in order to reinforce their own history.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They're
And,
they're they're transferring their fears to you, saying,
exactly.
"I'm afraid to do this. You shouldn't do this."
Yeah, like it will inevitably end in disaster. I was
Yeah.
right to not do it. It wasn't just my fear. You
Right.
know, like it's that attitude. And you know, I'm quite an obstinate person. I really didn't want to have to face any of those people. I'd be like, yeah, you were right. Like, but I think, yeah, it is the also, and again, I said this is the thing about growing up in a kind of controlled Western environment, that for all that it does give you various educational benefits and things, it does protect you from the sharp edges of life. But you don't know who you are until those sharp edges come out.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
actually, I needed to know who I was more than I needed to be saved from the situation.
I like that. You had to know who you are more than you need to be safe.
Yeah.
That's good. Um, so you're saying that you just started to serve other people. It sounds like you're serving these communities, teaching and helping them, and that helped you to where you could get out of this situation and move forward.
Yeah,
That'd
and
be a fair
it
statement.
became just a matter of recognizing that the world is out there, and that actually, the more you engage with it at every level, the more it will return to you.
Mm,
And like it was at that point that also I stopped worrying about what the potential outcome of things would be before I did them. Because that's another thing where it's like you sit and you think, oh, should I try this? Is this the right way to try it? Should I do that? And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing things, and then if it doesn't work, I'll know soon enough.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Experiments, little experiments, and
Hmm.
it doesn't cost you a lot to try something for just a short time. So
Yeah, and it
yeah.
certainly costs you less than sitting around worrying about it. Like oddly enough, so I have a friend who is a therapist. Oddly enough, um, and you know he's quite good at it. I assume, like I mean, people who I'm aware of have seen him go on well. But he's recently been really struggling with not being willing to execute his plans because he's worried that it's not sustainable or that it's not going to work or he's going to get knocked back. And I think that's telling because, I mean, he spends his days telling people how to get over this problem.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, he himself still struggles with it, which I don't think is a result of a flaw of any kind, right? It is purely human.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I say that like you could leverage yourself up as long as you are willing to be unforgiving in a certain way, you
Mm.
know, like, towards yourself, and not in
Yeah.
a kind of merciless or cruel way, but just in the sense of being unforgiving about your journey and your path towards where you want to be. Like, funnily enough, something that made a big difference or has made a big difference over the last few years is the elder community, like the generation above us and that.
Hmm.
So every single one of my family, extended family, cousins, everything, earns significant multiples above what I do. Right. I'd be
Yeah.
kind of 20, 30 plus times as much. On the other hand, I have a certain respect within the older generation that they don't, which bothers some of them from time to time. But I think exists because they recognize that I've been through certain initiations that a lot of others haven't,
Yeah.
you know, and that they have seen, and which mean that they feel it's more all right. Because something I learned from that stuff as well was the more you expose your own hurts and harms, the more other people will open up about theirs to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they experienced a lot of trials and got to where they are through their hard work, and now they see you doing the same thing and not living off the ease of what they've done. So
Mm.
yeah, that would garner some respect, I would think, from them.
No, and I think it's funny because I always felt bad about not making any money relative to all of the clan.
Mm.
But the more I've gone along this path, the more it seems to me that actually, the only thing you can be really certain of is that you are going to live once
Yeah.
for 80-ish years.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there might be reincarnation, there might be afterlives, this, that, the other, but these are all postulates. The only thing you can be certain of is you are here now.
Right. Today is what you got.
Yeah, and the longer I spent here, the more I found myself just bewildered by people I knew back in England where they were just wasting away the days of their lives. Like, you're earning lots of money, and that's nice, but you keep talking about these things you want to do when you retire, but you should do them now because you want to do them now. Like, you're letting yourself get caught into a trap that actually I think has gotten worse and worse in a lot of the West.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding that myself is when you have the means, you should do those things, not put them off, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. You get by a bus.
You may not want it. You may live on the other side of the planet. You may decide to throw everything in and go and live in an ashram,
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's that's the hard part is being present today. And there's a lot of things I want to do that I don't have the means to do yet, but I'm working towards, generating those means to do the things I would like to do. And
yeah,
so,
and I think also, because the other side of that is you get on one side taught to think of it as, oh, but you need resources. Like, I remember at one point I went to visit my brother in California, where he at the time was working. He's an engineer, and we were at a pub and we got chatting to someone. And they asked what I did, and I was like, oh, do these things, started this NGO and whatever. And they said, oh, I always wanted to do something like that. But like, I'm going to get rich first. And I was like, if that's what you really want to do, then you don't need the get rich bit. You just need to start working on it and you'll get there. Like, this idea that you must have a certain amount of resources behind you in order to even attempt anything actually is something to keep you in place and to stop you from moving around, or because there are lots of things you can do without all the money. You've just got to be savvier about them and about what you do.
Yeah. And resources aren't necessarily money, but understanding and knowledge, experience, all those things are part of that growing process as we move towards the things we want. So
there's a quote here, actually. I just called it up. It's from a book I've actually never read. I did try reading Gravity's Rainbow, but I just couldn't do it. Pynchon is too much for me. But this personal density is directly proportional to temporal bandwidth. Temporal bandwidth is the width of your present, your now. It is the familiar delta T considered as a dependent variable. The more you dwell in the past and in the future, the thicker your bandwidth, the more solid your persona. But the narrower your sense of now, the more tenuous you are. It may get to where you're having trouble remembering what you were doing 5 minutes ago, or even what you're doing here.
Wow.
I don't know, I've thought of that one. It's kind of resonated with me a lot as I've thought about just that sense of being in the moment you're in and properly flowing from like your past to your future rather than getting all locked up about one or the other of them.
And that's probably, like you say, that this Western culture really is focused on, well, where are you going to be in 20 years? What are you going to do in 10 years?
And not who are you
not who you going to be, or who are you right now? And if you want to change who you are, what goals, how do you change who you are to be that person you want to be next year or next month, or and that's really the change of focus I'm trying to do in my own self. As I call the show Rebuilding, because I really am trying to rebuild myself at my age from that cookie cutter, went to school, became an engineer, worked for 25 years. Now I'm looking at retirement, and who do I want to be in retirement? When I stop being an engineer because they deem that I'm too old or I get too far behind the learning curve. But who do I want to be? And
I think
that's
actually, in amongst the various parish chats, one of them is a friend who he must be mid-60s, I think, like 60 to 65, I'd say.
mm-hmm.
He spent all of his career as a policeman in England, and moved out here when he retired, basically, because he had family out here and stuff. And we've been talking a lot recently, and at one point he very almost like tentatively said to me, because we were talking about this kind of like growth and just facing of the world, and in particular we were talking about just Englishness and like its particular distortions, and he said, I'm leaving it a bit late, but I do feel like I'm starting on this journey and pushing along. And the thing is, he says that, and my parents have now retired and are looking younger than they did at any point in the last 30 years. Right? Because they can finally be themselves in a way that they always thought was never actually going to be an option. Like, and this is for the friend that was a policeman as well, right? It's almost like he went through the whole thing being told, no, you don't need to worry about these things or about who you are or how you want to live. And then expected to die fairly soon after retirement or to be locked into the situation he was in and therefore with no options. And then suddenly the world, like my mum now is slowly coming around to the idea that she's got a decent 15, 20 years left. Because up until now, when she was growing up, when people were 55, they were either dead or close to dead.
Yeah.
So in her mind, retirement was only ever going to be 6 months before she finally shuffled off the mortal coil.
Right.
And it's taken her years to, it's almost the same process that you're talking about of rebuilding, where it's saying, well, okay, now all of that stuff is done and I've got the resources I need to actually choose what I want to do with my time, with my energy, what to spend it on and how I want that to evolve. But I think that's it. Like, this again comes back to this idea of how dangerous the myth of the static identity is.
Yeah.
And it's telling that my mum has this issue because she should not believe in the static identity. She is a very committed Hindu. And Hinduism requires a belief in an evolving spiritual identity. Like there are no alternatives. Your life is an evolution in one direction or another that gets accounted for when you get reborn under that system.
Right.
So in order for that to be meaningful, there must be meaningful change within your lifetime. Right? Otherwise, you could not accumulate or build up karmic debts.
Right.
And she nonetheless has this idea that no, there is an identity that's her identity as the daughter of this person, the husband of that person, the mother of these persons. And it's almost like she believes that seeing herself as a person is somehow gauche, like it's gaudy or
wow.
Like
no, that's unusual to me that what you're saying, is she has this idea that would be
it's almost like it's a luxury.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's the kind of thing that, you could do if you had infinite time and leisure, but all real people don't do because, there are more important things to be getting on with.
You're right.
But that's a mindset that is very insidious and very common,
Yeah.
I think, and in fact, there are a lot of people now that I mean, between the fact people live for so much longer and live properly healthy lives so much longer,
Mhm.
and just the drastic changes where you could have a career that up until 20 years ago was a career for life, and today is a career for the next 15 minutes until a robot works out how to do it. Um, like, so that this process or the need for this continual growth and rebuilding is actually becoming more and more societally necessary, it seems to me.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be something where it's kind of optional because society was so locked in anyway that the alternatives were quite strong, right?
Right.
The non-growth options were totally stable for very long periods of time.
Yeah.
Now that stability doesn't really exist, so growth is the only option because it's
Right.
that or death, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't go and work the same job for 30 years anymore and get your gold watch and go sit in your rocker on your front porch. And
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen that way anymore. You do have to continually kind of retool yourself every few years to even to survive.
Yeah, just to keep up. It's the red
Yeah.
queen hypothesis. It's so this is used a lot in biology. So when you talk about the way that species co-evolve, then there is the red queen hypothesis is from Alice in Wonderland, where you
Mhm.
have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place.
Mm.
So because people often get confused about evolution and stuff as these like teleological processes that are kind of building towards a particular thing. But the red queen hypothesis actually says everything in nature is just running as hard as it can, trying to survive to stay in the same place.
So as you've done this, remind me or tell me an NGO. I've not heard that term. I
Oh,
don't
it's
use
a
it here.
non-government organization, a charity.
Oh, okay, okay. So as you've done this work, um, how has that changed your understanding of your own strengths, of your own abilities?
It's made them much more stripped down, I think. Like my understanding of my strengths and abilities used to be quite sophisticated in the sense of being particular.
Hmm.
If so, so I was very focused on particular narrow areas where I had a lot of knowledge.
Hmm.
Whereas, because also in the process of the NGO, because that kind of faded after I moved to a different town where I now have got married and so on. And I switched over to focusing more on my writing in various ways. And the process of it was in recognizing that strengths are only potential. I think that's the thing beforehand, and before I'd come here, I had this idea that a strength is something that is defined and assessed. You know, it is a
Okay.
specified thing
Hmm.
that you have. I mean, in an engineering sense, almost,
Right.
right? You know the strength of this because you've got all these numbers to back it up.
Right.
And whereas post, especially things getting particularly bad, I recognized that strength is the strength to attempt, not
Mm.
necessarily the
Yeah.
strength to do. And that actually I could only work out what my genuine strengths were by just attempting whatever appeared, and seeing how it worked out. In a funny way, I learned to trust I learned to trust my opinion of myself a lot less. You know,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
trust the reality of myself and the actual hard data a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That brings you back to reality because your opinion of yourself,
Mm.
um,
Yeah, it
sometimes
can
you can
distort
pump
very.
yourself up as not very accurate.
Mm.
Oh. Okay. So if someone came to you with similar challenges, I don't know that everybody's going to go through exactly,
No.
but they're wanting to be wanting to move into to understand how to serve other people or to get away from the structured life more into a service life, I would imagine. or to say what kind of suggestions, what kind of help would you offer someone that came to you that wanted to change their life?
I think there are three essential tips, really. The first is just get on with it. Trust your instincts. Let them guide you away from your comfort zone. Don't listen to the voice that says, oh no, we should wait until we've checked. Don't do that. Just get on with it. Like,
Okay.
see what happens. Like, it is the number one way of finding out what your options really are. And also, it solves your worries, because you go from worrying about potential things to worrying about definitely real things. Secondly, be wary of your thinking. Right? So Kierkegaard talks a lot about, I forget his particular terminology, but it's second order thinking. So thinking about thinking, right? So thoughts about your mental processes, right? Your second order thinking is very important, because a lot of your first order thinking isn't really thinking. It's just emotional responses or reactions or habits. Or, I mean, it presents itself as a thought. And as far as you can tell, it's a thought. But that doesn't mean it is a genuine thought, a constructed cognitive artifact.
Okay.
And the thing is, I mean, it's worth remembering there that Kierkegaard was very deeply Christian. And he's writing this in the Enlightenment, where you've got a lot of preaching going on that is whipping up a lot of hysteria that is very not friendly. And you have a corollary movement in Christianity for, they get called apologists, but I really don't like that term, because it implies they're apologizing for rather than simply discussing. But you get people like Kierkegaard that say, but wait a second, because a big part of Christianity is actually focusing on that second order thinking, right? When Jesus says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, what he's saying is, watch your thoughts. Don't let those first order thoughts be the ones that you respond to. So be aware that your initial thoughts aren't necessarily there to serve you, and you need to be able to think rationally about why you're thinking and feeling what you're feeling. And the third thing is, so this again is something where the language we have for describing it, I think, is insufficient, which is magical thinking. So a lot of people misunderstand magical thinking and think of it as this kind of wishing for things, or as a way of distorting the world in certain ways, right? Making things appear or disappear or whatever.
Right.
But magical thinking in its deep human sense, in the sense in which it's existed in every human culture that we've ever had a record of, is essentially a kind of self-hypnosis, right? It's a way of taking something that you want, right? Or a state of affairs you want to see in the world, and focusing your mental energies into it to the point where you forget what the initial desire was, because you've pushed it into your subconscious, right? And the reason why magical thinking works is that once you've pushed this desire out of your conscious mind and down into your subconscious, you react subconsciously towards that thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the kind of the classical magical version is writing out a sentence, collapsing it into a single symbol, and then focusing on the symbol and meditating upon it. But the same thing is done by thinking of a representative saint or a particular representative spirit or cognitive idea. The essence of it is, if you think of it in this very explicit, I want to have a Porsche sense or whatever, then this is a kind of desire that will never be really pushed down into your subconscious because it's too immediate and material. Your desires need to be things where you say, I will be a better person, or I will be able to survive. And then you see, it sounds very airy-fairy and like pagan and hippie and stuff, But actually, every culture and every faith has its own version of magical thinking, and of training yourself to respond correctly in the path that you feel is the path of the universe. And actually leaning into whatever the version of that is in your own particular faith is often a big part of people developing.
Okay. Cool. Well, we're just about to the end of our time here. Any final recommendations to others as you build your life, or as you would recommend to them to help them rebuild their lives?
I would say it's the first thing and most important thing is take the time to work out what you genuinely want and who you genuinely are, and work it out by putting yourself in situations you wouldn't normally find yourself in.
Get yourself uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yes, you don't have to go hunting tigers with a knife, but put yourself in situations that are extremely new or unusual until you have an idea of who you actually are. Because I think it's very easy in the modern world to get caught up in the idea that you are this accumulation of your goods, or you are how much you can earn, or any of this. And it makes it harder and harder for people to say, okay, it is justified for me to take a step back and work out what my very simple desires are, right? It's not crude or simplistic to say that this is what I want out of life. And I think a lot of people feel like you've got to chase other things because you feel like what you want out of life is not okay for you to want. But it is. It's what you want. It must be.
Okay. Yeah. We force ourselves to want what everybody else thinks we want them.
And in the process, we forget to want to be us. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. How do we how did people get in contact with you if they want to learn more? What's the best way for them to
visit my website at lamplight.design, which lists my audiobooks and my books and various buying links for all of them, along with samples. Otherwise, I've got the normal range of social media profiles, which if you just look for Chirag Patel audiobooks or Lamplight audiobooks, you should find.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This has been very interesting and very enlightening, and I hope that someone touches somebody's heart and moves them forward.
Yeah, look, if you could make as well. Oh, that's, I guess, a nice parting thought. That one of the things that really pushed me through all of those times is the numbers don't matter. If you can make a genuine difference to a single person's life, then your life has not been in vain.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not about changing everyone's life, but if you can be good to people where you can, then that is enough. And it's okay to believe it's enough.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks a lot, Jay. I must go.
Okay. Well, thanks again. And I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Definitely.
As always, thank you for listening to Rebuilding. I hope that you have heard something today that will help you on your path to rebuilding your life. If something resonated, if you felt a call to action, please take that action and rebuild. Let me know what you think of today's show or any of my shows. You can leave comments at rebuilding.podbean.com or email at j@jwalter.com. I would love to hear from you. Comments, suggestions, and topics that you would like me to cover are always welcome. Remember, a dream written down with a deadline is a goal, and a goal achieved is a dream come true. Until next time, I am Jay Walter, and I am always rebuilding.